everybody, and welcome to another board game discussion video. Today's topic, I believe, is extremely important and really needs to be delved into a lot more. I did touch on it a little bit when I was talking about collections and how I personally feel as a board game collector and stuff like that, and that is with limited editions and price gouging that happens primarily on the secondary markets for board games. Now, before I really get started, as always, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my Facebook and my Twitter pages. On those, I'll post new articles. Whenever I release a new video, I'll let you guys know, and it's a great way for you all to keep in touch with me, as well as I'll have contests and giveaways and stuff like that. You can also take a look at my new Patreon page. At my Patreon page, you guys can actually sponsor my channel and have even more control over what I do and when I do it, and I have some great rewards for you guys to check out, so please go ahead and do that if you have not done so. Getting back on topic, today, again, limited editions and price gouging on the secondary market for games. There are three major things that I really wanted to talk about with this particular topic. The first thing is where I have seen the most firestorm for this, and that is with Kickstarter games. I've mentioned Kickstarter games in several contexts, essentially talking about this the same way, where I had one where I talked about miniatures, I had another video where I talked about collections in general, and a few other things, but today we're going to talk about it in this form of secondary market price gouging. The next thing I wanted to discuss were games that I think are done very, very well in this sense, and just sort of what's different about them and how is it different, and is it possible that we get that back, at least a little bit. And then finally, just sort of like some pros and cons to the entirety of the system. First and foremost, Kickstarter. Kickstarter is a great platform, especially for small game developers, to get their designs out there. And I think that is wonderful. It's tremendous, and there's a lot of great companies out there that do it. The problem is, especially if a game is really, really good, we see a ton of price gouging. I've seen this a lot recently, and it really inspired me to make this video on forums, Facebook groups that do board game exchanges, and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of games that I want to try, games that I want to play, for example, like Conan, and I'm just like, oh, I would love to try that out, but the cheapest I can find it is like $200 for the original Kickstarter thing, and I'm just like, why is that? This is terrible. It's so frustrating. And on top of that, with Kickstarters, we got like exclusives and all that kind of stuff that I talked about a little bit in some of my previous videos, but that in and of itself is another video. One example that I do actually have is Scythe. This is a great game. It's a tremendous game that I got relatively recently because it had a reprint. And the fact is that this is the rarity amongst most Kickstarter games, is that you see it come back. Normally, once a Kickstarter game is gone, it's gone, and you won't see it except on the secondary market. And that is frustrating. It's frustrating for me as a gamer, it's frustrating for me as a collector, it's just frustrating in general. And the reason for that is I worry about what it does to me mentally as a person, as somebody who wants to buy some of these games. Because I had a video a while ago where I talked about my grail games, the games that I really, really want to have, but for one reason or other, just don't. And by and large, it's because they're really expensive, because they're no longer in print. And it's so frustrating. To a great extent, I can understand it, especially with Kickstarter games. A lot of times the company doesn't have enough money to do another printing. There's not enough interest to warrant it. But at the same time, these Kickstarter games, they're only available for, what, 30 to 40 days, just depending on exactly how the Kickstarter is. And I'm like, well, what if I don't have the money right at this moment? What if I don't know whether or not I'm going to like it? I cannot afford to take the risk. I cannot afford to buy it right now. I already spent my money for the month, for example, and it's so frustrating. And that's exactly what happened with Scythe. When Scythe first came to Kickstarter, it just so happened that it was in a month where I had already spent my entertainment budget, so I couldn't buy it, and I really wanted to. I knew it was going to be incredible, but I just couldn't afford it. So as soon as the reprinting came out, I immediately bought it. Because the fact is that I don't know how quickly it was going to sell out again. I don't know if after selling out they were going to have it again. And it frustrates me again as a collector, as a gamer, because I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it. And If I do find it, I'm worried that I'm going to have to pay 3 or 4 times the original price. We see this most frequently with video games and specifically with Nintendo systems. So when the Wii was released, when the Wii U was released, and when most recently the Switch was released, people charging 200% markups from retail price because they could. Because it's the law of supply and demand and capitalism and all that great stuff. And I say this after I talk about Scythe, right? Ironic, I know. But that's beside the point. Like, again, I talked about this in my collection video where I don't collect games in order to resell them. I don't collect games thinking that I'm going to make a profit off of them, because that's not why I do it. I do it because I want to play games. And I hate the fact that I feel the need to buy a game simply because I don't know if I'm going to be able to later. It ruins my mentality. It somewhat ruins the fun of the game. It happened here with Scythe. It happened with Star Wars Rebellion. It happened with Clank. I just recently got Clank because I don't know if it's going to be printed again, right? And we all know Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower, he has his rule where if a game is good enough, it's going to be reprinted. Well, I submit to you, what about Dune? Dune is one of my Grail games, and the fact is that it's most likely an issue with the IP, right? And if something like that happens, we are never going to see that game again. And it sucks, because that means I'm probably not going to be able to get an original copy, which is what I really want to have. And again, I can understand the constraints of the publishers. They want to make certain that if they do a print run, they're going to be able to sell it. If they're going to be doing a new edition, are people going to be interested in it? A perfect example of that is Fury of Dracula, which I got somewhere around here, I think. It's all the way at the top. But that's a good example because I have the 3rd edition of Fury of Dracula. And the first 2 editions were good. But the 3rd edition is a little bit better. Same thing, Cosmic Encounter. I love Cosmic Encounter, favorite game of all time. Honestly, my favorite iteration now is the Fantasy Flight version. I think they changed a lot of good things that needed to be changed. They took out some stuff that I liked, but there's enough there that I'm like, yes, this is my favorite edition because it's the most structured. And again, it's frustrating because sometimes I honestly feel like I have to buy a game because I will not be able to later on. And again, Kickstarter is really the biggest problem with this kind of thing. As soon as I get some of these back in stock alerts, I'm like, crap, if I don't buy it now, am I going to be able to wait a month? Is it still going to be there? On top of that, if it's not there, when, if ever, is it going to be back? And I hate thinking that as a gamer because I just want to play these great games. That's all I want to do. I don't want to have to go to somebody and pay a 300% markup just because the game is so popular that people want to buy it, but it's not popular enough to yet warrant a reprint. And it's just, and again, that is the central problem that I have with it. That is the central problem. Moving on to a little bit of happier news, games that do it a little bit differently. The fact is that the more popular a game is, the less likely it's not going to be on the shelves. Perfect example is this guy, Settlers of Catan. You may notice that I have an older version of this. I do. I don't have the latest version of Settlers of Catan because I got it secondhand. And I only paid like $15 for it. You know why? Because you can go to Target, you can go to Walmart, and you can buy Settlers of Catan. It has become popular enough that it is everywhere. Same thing with Pandemic. Pandemic is another perfect example of this. It's probably never going to go away. And the fact is, it's most likely due to the fact that it's just so popular. Another perfect example, Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride, never going to go away, has a ridiculous number of iterations. Don't even get me started on, what was it, the 10th anniversary edition that cost like $150 or something like that. Ugh. Settlers of Catan did the same thing. Gorgeous anniversary edition with like the molded pieces and all that kind of thing. Came in a giant treasure chest essentially. Why do you do that? I don't understand. This is fine. Just leave it like this. This is perfectly fine. Send it to Walmart, send it to Target, give it to everybody. Make sure everybody has a copy, right? This is the type of thing that I love to see. And again, I understand from the business perspective, the capitalistic perspective, having games like this, having games that are so popular that you're even able to put them into these big chain stores is difficult. Scythe is never going to be in Walmart. That's just a fact. If it ever is, then something is going very well with society that is not currently happening. And I understand that. Even going to friendly local game stores, you're going to see huge markup on these games from the retail value. And not to mention a little bit of price gouging from the Kickstarters themselves. Perfect examples being like Kingdom Death Monster and Gloomhaven, which cost hundreds of dollars just off of the Kickstarter itself. And I'm just like, why? Like, yes, I want it, but I can't pay $250 for a game that I've never even seen. It doesn't make sense. Like, how am I supposed to justify this? It's absolutely ridiculous coming directly from the company itself, much less. But that's a little bit more in the Kickstarter realm. Again, games that I like, games that are doing it reasonably well, reasonably correctly, so to speak, are essentially the ones that are so popular that they're never, ever, ever going to go away, like Ticket to Ride and Settlers. And I am perfectly happy with that. I absolutely love it. I really do. And like I said, sort of last but not least, just sort of like general pros and cons a little bit and some stuff like that. The thing is that, again, in the capitalistic market, the capitalist society, then it's good to sell as much as you can as quickly as you can, right? And having a strong secondary market is wonderful. I mean, look at things like Magic the Gathering and other collectible card games. Having a strong secondary market is very, very important. But in my opinion, you need to make sure that you have a reasonable secondary market as well. The secondary market for some of these games is absolutely ridiculous. Having a game that's out of print is so difficult to find. Well, typically at least it's very difficult to find, and it's just frustrating. And I wish that there was a fix for it, but short of publish all games ever, all the time, it's not going to happen. And again, going back to Tom Vasel's rule, if a game is good enough, then it will always be reprinted. Then like some reprint will occur at some point. Like, yeah, but part of the problem too is that the games that I really want aren't necessarily games that are super popular. They're not necessarily games that are on a publisher's list for a reprint at some point. And it makes me sad, and it makes me anxious, and it makes me think, if this game comes on the market and I can buy it new from some, like whether it's Amazon or Cool Stuff Inc. or Miniatures Market, whatever it is, then I'm like, I have to buy this because I don't know when or if it's going to come back. And I'm at the point now where I've been collecting for a decent number of years, and several of the games that I own, that I bought when I first started collecting, are now out of print, and they're going for like $100 or $150. And I'm just like, wow, I'm so glad that I got it at that time. But the fact is, when I bought them, I had no reason to even consider that was a possibility. It's like, why would I? Why would I think that would have been an issue? But now with all of this other stuff, especially with Kickstarter games, and I'm sitting here having to think, should I buy it? It looks really good. It's a theme that I really enjoy. But is it going to come to other stores? Am I going to be able to buy it later? I honestly don't know, and it scares me, and I don't like that. I really don't like the fact that this kind of thing is going on. It's so frustrating, and it makes me genuinely upset as a gamer to see this kind of thing. But either way, that's enough rambling and ranting from me. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Again, this is a tremendously important topic, and I'm very curious what you guys have to say about it. You know, this is all sorts of out-of-print editions, out-of-print games. I mean, we see it all the time. We see a huge secondary market for board games, but so often the games are just ridiculously expensive. And I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it, what your opinions are on this subject. Again, extremely important that I've talked about a little bit, but really wanted to dive into a lot more. So with that, thank you very, very much again for watching, and I will see you next time.